Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Jyoti. I think this was a much needed conference. Immuno-oncology is kind of the new kid on the block, and there are many conferences all over the world. So congratulations for this effort. And I can see that my panelists have all run to that side. So I'm a little perturbed about that. So if you can come a little closer, I promise I won't bite, because this topic is as new to me as it is for you. And the fact that we don't have that much data is pretty clear by the fact that we've been given 25 minutes in the entire 2 days. So let's try and make the most of those. So I thought I'd kick off with a clinical situation that we see all the time. So this is a 42-year-old well-educated lady. She's been treated for triple-negative early breast cancer 2 years ago. She had T2N1 disease, received dose-dense AC and paclitaxel along with adjuvant radiation, underwent BRCA testing as her cousin had breast cancer and turned out to be negative. She comes from a good socioeconomic background. She now presents with a persistent cough for the last 2 months, and further testing reveals bone metastasis, bilateral lung nodules, and a minimal right pleural effusion. So I would like to start with my panelists from the other end. What would you consider doing next?
So I would still consider going with chemotherapy.
And what would be your choice?
And I would, because she's triple negative, even though she's BRCA negative, would consider giving her gemcitabine with carboplatin, because she's received, I think, paclitaxel before. So.
Very fair. Okay. So Dr. Mansi, she seems to be a little well-informed, as some of our patients are nowadays, and gets on the net and comes up with, I want to be treated aggressively and differently, and cost is not an issue for me. So what would you do then? Would you do any additional testing on her blocks?
So if cost is not an issue and the patient is highly keen, yes, I would like to get a PD-L1 testing done on the block, with the caveat that, I would also prefer chemotherapy in the first line setting in this situation, not
Absolutely.
very keen on going ahead with immunotherapy,
Right.
adding at this particular time.
Right.
But yes, it's an option. We can do a PD-L1 testing.
So Dr. Lakshmi, routinely when you see a metastatic triple negative in your clinic, and they have tissue with them, and there's been 1.5 years or 2 years of a relapse-free interval, do you order any additional testing on the blocks, or are you just happy with the ER/PR HER2?
There are papers there are.
No, what do you do in the clinic?
We don't routinely do it,
Right.
but in situations where patient demands for a higher treatment, and especially in these kind of situations, there is no harm in going ahead with a PD-L1. And rebiopsy has shown that 8% of tumors can have ER/PR expression.
So a change in receptor
Change in
expression.
receptor expression. That is
So
around
you
8
would
to 10%.
rebiopsy this patient?
That can be considered, but my
Okay.
first choice for treatment would be Gem/Carbo.
Sanjoy, what do you think? Would, if you were to retest the blocks, is PD-L1 all you would look for?
We don't usually do a PD-L1
Okay.
routinely. We do offer these patients the atezolizumab study. So
Right.
we do have the study of using it in first-line metastatic breast cancer.
Right.
But routinely we don't offer PD-L1
Any
testing in
additional
these
testing?
patients, no.
Sudeep, what about you?
So exactly like him, we also have the trial going on.
We also have the trial going
But
on.
we don't- and
Say
so-
we didn't have the trial.
No, so I will give Gem and Carbo.
So Gem/Carbo, and you wouldn't do any further testing on the block. You'd reserve that for later.
It's not that I would reserve that for later. It is just that if the patients, I would discuss with the patient the results of the recent randomized trial that I
Correct.
think you are leading everybody up to.
Right.
And possibly do the PDL1 testing. But when we get to that trial, I must say that I am not completely overwhelmed by the results. I am actually underwhelmed.
So there is time to be underwhelmed. So just relax about that. Let's get to it slowly, because we need to take a step at a time. Tanuja, tell me about, you told me some very provocative data out there about PD-L1 testing and your experience at Tata.
The reason I'm here instead of Neeta is because I opened my mouth before I'm supposed to open. So the thing is that Jyoti actually 3 or 4 years ago, everything had been launched. He said, I want PD-L1 in a breast cancer triple negative patient, young patient and all. And I got reason out of my slumber, because my first question was, what is this validation? You know, we have to show validation. We can't do testing just like that. And believe it or not, for the breast cancer, we use the 263 antibody. The controls we use is the placenta. It's as non-specific as the placenta. So what I thought is, why not look at all our triple cancer database and just do PDL1 and see how many of them are really positive, because that will give me positive cases for future. So only 13, we analyzed I think 263 odd. These are, they were TMS, they were not whole sections, because I have a study going on. So the tumor sections from there were available, and I quickly ran through some 200 odd triple negative cancers. Only 13% of them were PDL1 positive. What was interesting is that the stroma picked up, because these are all triple negatives, the lymphocyte predominant kind of cancer, and the stroma picked up PDL1 positive macrophages, and very frequently. And interestingly, in the overall survival, because I had that this is a retrospective cohort, the PDL1 expression in macrophages was favorable for survival, whereas
Right.
PD1 expression did not matter. So this is just the quick.
So it's telling you something. All right. So let's go further.
Ask her one
Yes,
question.
of course.
Actually, you know, if the PDL1 was overexpressed in the infiltrating immune cells, in the absence of immunotherapy, that would mean immunosuppression. So shouldn't that lead to a worse survival? I mean,
No, these are the macrophages. So they control the tumor better.
So my next question is what he just said, that how exactly do we test? Is the denominator all immune cells that are infiltrating the tumor, or all tumor plus immune cells, or
Yes.
what? And what was your cutoff for the positivity?
So the cutoff for breast is very low. It's only 1%. But we just recorded. The immune cells was just an observation, and we took them into our consideration. We were actually looking at PDL1 in tumor cells.
So, like for other cervical cancer, do we have that composite score similar
Yes,
for?
you have a CPS
the
score,
score,
where they combine the tumor and the immune cells. And funnily enough, the trial that we're going to look at, the Impassion 130, actually looked at these different expressions, and they found only 9% of the entire population was expressing PDL1 on the tumor cells, and up to 40% were expressing it on the immune cells, which is a little different from other solid tumors. Other solid tumors, you do look at the tumor cells rather than the immune cells.
So same thing with us. 25% of the microenvironment was positive. So.
So this lady goes in and has the whole gambit done. She doesn't have TMB. And just a little word about PDL1 expression. So more or less restricted to triple negatives. On an average, 20 to 25% is the expression of PDL1. There's a lot of hype about stromal TILs, and I just want to talk to Tanuja because she's going to be on the block for this. Tanuja, what is this? I mean, there's actually a website that Shireen Loy put up that you can go to, and you can punch in your values of stromal TILs, and you can come up with a prognostic score in patients on neoadjuvant therapy. So is there a truth, or is this all hype?
So I think we all need to soil our hands in this before
Yeah.
we say so. It's difficult. Let me tell you that tumors are very heterogeneous. In
Right.
some tumors, I think in TNBCs only it works because TNBCs, in terms of TILs, it's very uniform.
Right.
It's fairly uniform.
So
but
is
it
it
won't,
like a lymphoma where you're just eyeballing like a
Correct.
Hodgkin's, like you're calling
Correct.
it lymphocyte predominant?
Correct.
So if you see more lymphocytic infiltrate than tumor cell, then you call it LPBC.
No, it's not so much of an eyeballing. You're
Yeah.
supposed to mark the stromal area
Right.
and actually count cells per, and give a percentage. But the issues occur is that the lymphocytes are not uniformly scattered towards the thing. We all take limited number of sections. Most of the labs will give you, you don't take the whole tumor block. Now we've started because now we realize the importance in TMH, but most pathologists will take 3 or 4 sections. So how represented they are, that's the main question. Second thing is the measurements of peripheral versus central TILs. That still remains a contrary, though Loy's group says that you have to measure it, not at the periphery. That's what
and it shouldn't be touching the tumor
Correct,
at all.
correct.
Right?
So there is some amount of discordance there in reporting. So most people besides this group who have said, they are saying that we are not comfortable reporting
With
TILs.
TILs.
What we can safely report is the lymphocyte predominant triple negative breast cancer, because it's like there is nobody will disagree that everywhere there are lymphocytes.
So would it not be cheaper to do a TIL than to do a PDL1 testing? What does my panel think? Because they do seem to correlate pretty okay.
So
In a
again,
setting as ours,
so
PDL1 is not a cheap antibody to do.
So actually, stromal TILs did not correlate very well with the PDL1 expression in the trial that
In
you will
Passion
discuss
130.
at some point of time. And so stromal TIL was not a very good predictor of PDL1 status, which is why it did not correlate with overall survival, only with PFS.
Okay.
So, I mean, it can be a loose surrogate, but especially if you're wanting to treat with something, you might as well do the test that was done in the study.
Absolutely. So the patient's blocks are sent and we get androgen receptor negative, PDL1 54%, stromal TILs high and MS stable. So the question is, will immunotherapy work for breast cancer? We've always considered them to be immunologically cold, but we have increased TILs in TNBC and PD-L1 expression. Monotherapy has not been very successful with immune checkpoint blockade, and we have responses of less than 20%. Over 20% if used in the first line setting. And there are many strategies for making these blockade agents more effective, and adding chemotherapy is one of them. So this is just the group of trials where monotherapy was used. You can see precisely the same thing. So let's ask our panelists, have they had any experience, whether in clinical trials or in practice, using immune checkpoint blockade in triple negative breast cancer? Supriya, would you like to start?
Not.
Have you been involved in a study or trial?
So I have not had in primary. I don't treat the breast cancer, but in
What about
metastatic setting.
gynec malignancies?
So not in gynec malignancy, but many time in metastatic situations, not in upfront situations.
Right.
We have combined, and there is actually quite a logic. You mentioned about immunologically cold tumors. So I think combining them with any kind of very high dose radiation, it makes immunologically hot, and the
Yes.
response to immune therapy can change. So two settings where I have treated is in liver metastasis, nivolumab and stereotactic radiation for liver.
So this is a patient of?
It's a melanoma patient
All right,
originally,
okay.
nothing to do with breast,
Right.
but coming with TNBC. So when you have, for example, now it's an upfront situation or a progressingly relapse situation.
Right.
So combining, and I think there's lots of encouraging data also coming for stereotactic radiation, this ASTRO, for at least patients who are no more in oligometastatic range, but slightly more than that.
So you're talking of the abscopal effect.
Yes, abscopal
and there is
effect.
data for that.
And making the milieu immunologically hot.
Yeah.
So I think gynec will talk later, but for this discussion, I'll stop here.
Yeah. So any of my panelists, two of you are taking part in the Impassion 131.
So the trial is a double-blind trial.
Right.
It's a placebo-controlled trial, so I don't really know who's on atezolizumab and who's on placebo.
Right.
And thus far, there is one patient whose TSH is kept going up and up and up, and I suspect that patient is on the atezolizumab arm.
Right.
But apart from that, I have observed nothing out of the extraordinary in the few patients that we have randomized.
So they've
And
had-
I have, outside of the trial, I have treated exactly 2 patients with atezolizumab and nab-paclitaxel, and both of them did not respond very well.
Okay.
But 2 is a very small number, it's just
Of
2 case
course,
reports.
Of course. Sanjoy, what's your experience of the study?
The inclusion criteria of this study is actually pretty stringent. So although we've screened around 30 patients, we could only randomize 2.
Right.
And like Dr. Gupta was saying, it's very difficult to know which arm this patient is in. The thing that stood out in one patient was a raised AST.
Right.
And I don't know whether that is immune
That was
related or not.
immune-related hepatitis or not. Okay, so like Dr. Sanjoy said, that the criteria are very strict and they have to be disease-free for at least 12 months. Now, we know in our experience, we see a lot of patients of TNBC coming within a year with relapse. So most of these patients were, I think, ineligible for the study, and that's the problem I faced as well, and I got a couple of patients on the study. So if we revisit Impassion 130, which made these ESMO headlines last year, you can see that patients were randomized 1:1 to placebo or atezo, and they had about 940 odd patients. in the intention to treat and the placebo arm. And if you look, 40% of these patients were PD-L1 positive. Now, Dr. Tanuja has told us in her data, although retrospective, only 13 patients were positive. So that all has to be taken with a pinch of salt. Another thing to note was 40% almost were de novo. That means they had first presented with metastatic triple-negative cancer. So only 60% had been pre-treated with anthracyclines and taxanes, that too a year before. So these are the curves, and this is from the NEJM publication. And on this side, you have the progression-free survival. On your right side, you have the overall survival.
No, it's the upper row is the PFS. and
Sorry,
the lower row is the
sorry. Yes. So here you have the progression-free survival. Here you have the overall survival. If you look at the two cohorts, the intention to treat, which were all comers, there was about 1.7-month difference in the progression-free survival. This was statistically significant and a hazard ratio of 0.8. When you look at the progression-free survival in the PD-L1 positive group, you have a 2.5-month edge in the atezo-treated patients, hazard ratio of 0.62, and this was also highly significant. However, when you come to overall survival in all comers or intention to treat, although there was roughly a 4-month difference in the overall survival, this was not statistically significant. And as this included the trial-specified hierarchical testing, since they didn't get anything significant here, they could not do a formal testing for the PD-L1 positive group. Although the numbers speak for themselves, you can look at the curves. 15.5 months was the overall survival in the placebo group, and 25 months was the overall survival in the atezo group. So your take, any of my panelists on these curves? Jaya, would you like to start?
Yeah, so going back to the patient, I think because, see, I would really wait for more mature data on the overall survival, because in the all-comer group, there's still no difference, and even in the PFS benefit in the PD-L1 is about 2 months, although we
Right.
know that we could have more overall survival benefit and less of PFS benefit in immunotherapy. But I would really
Mansi?
wait for more
Yeah.
data before using it in the first-line setting
Right.
without an overall survival benefit, I mean, with immature overall survival
So
benefit
there's just
data.
a year plus of follow-up. Dr. Mansi, do you feel the same way? Do you think that the OS results are impressive?
So the point that I would like to note here is that when they started with around 300 patients to begin with,
Right.
and their primary endpoint was supposed to be PFS. They added on OS later on,
As a
and then they
co-primary
increased it as a
endpoint.
co-primary endpoint, and they increased it to 900 patients at that time.
Right.
The other thing was that the OS data that has come up, the 25 months versus 15.5 months, they've not really formally analyzed it statistically.
Right.
It's more of a hazard
It's a
ratio.
numeric, yeah.
It's a numeric.
Yeah.
It's a numeric ratio. So
Yeah.
again, I mean, it looks very, very impressive. It looks
Yeah.
very nice. But I think, again, I agree with Dr. Jaya Ghosh. We wait for the final data to come out.
Okay. Dr. Lakshmi, do you think these data are practice changing at all? And would, on Monday morning, when a patient with metastatic triple negative who fits these eligibility criteria walks into your clinic and says, I want the best and I have no cost constraint, would you at least discuss this trial with them?
Right now, I better may avoid it, because even though the p-value is very striking, statistically significant, everything,
Right.
when it comes to an individual patient decision, I would rather give the weightage for the difference in the PFS or OS, whatever. But only thing is that we have just a 10-month difference in this interim analysis. I would rather wait for mature reports to change my practice regarding it is also.
So you think that's really going to change? Because
Right now, I don't, I may not advocate and may wait for mature data.
okay, so if we look at the more recent publication or presentation at San Antonio last year, they did a very nice biomarker study which they presented, where they looked at PD-L1 with CD8, they looked at it with BRCA, they looked at it with TILs. And here if you look at the survival curves, these two survival curves are almost overlapping, nice gap over here. and in the overall survival, a similar thing. So, Sudeep, my question to you is, the PFS only improved by 2.5 months, but the OS improved by almost 10 months.
So
Isn't this a little...
So the first thing that I did not understand is in the abstract in the methods, they say there will be a hierarchical testing for OS. They will not even analyze the OS in the PDL1 subgroup if the overall OS
Is not significant.
So why are they showing these curves? They are not supposed to show these curves. They were not supposed to test these curves. Now, it is there, 15 versus 25 months, but this, if I make 20 analysis in data of 900 patients, I will find, many of them that are, this or that. So based on these results, the US FDA has provisionally approved the use of atezolizumab in TNBC, but they also require a confirmatory trial. They have said that this is a provisional approval.
It is provisional. So,
they were not even supposed to show that 15 versus 25. They were not supposed to do it according to their own materials and methods and according to their whole statistical construct. Now, I don't know what to make out of it. It is possibly real, and hopefully it is real. And a 10-month improvement in overall
striking
survival
for triple
in 40% of patients is a good result to have. But I am hoping that it is true and the confirmatory trial will not go the way Eniparib did.
absolutely. So I think that's a lesson to be learned, and this is the trial that we're looking for, Keynote 355, which is going to use Pembro, and they're going to use paclitaxel, nab-paclitaxel, and gem-carbo as the comparators. So I think that is something more relevant to our setting, and we'll be able to get some data. My only concern is they've got a 6-month cutoff point for progression-free since the first treatment. So they're looking at a more resistant population, and they may not be able to get the same survival data. So I know we're running out of time and enough of breast cancer. So I
just want to make one more point. So the median progression-free survival was 7.5 months in the PDL1, but the overall survival is 25 months.
Right.
And as per protocol, the immune checkpoint inhibitor gets stopped at the time of progression.
Right.
So what actually caused the remaining 10 months of improvement, I have to still think about it, and I have to sort of think of a logic by which that might have happened.
So then I tried to look at the treatments that they received post-progression, and only 4% received additional immunotherapy. So it was not getting more immunotherapy that made a difference. Chemotherapy regimens were compared
So
in
that
both
means that the
groups.
capecitabine that I give in December works better because the patient received atezolizumab in February of that year. That's that is what I have to think about. When I think of the logic, then a treatment that is delivered 10 months later works better in prolonging survival because the patient has received immune checkpoint inhibitor 10 months earlier or 12 months earlier.
So there's something happening that we
Yeah,
don't know.
but
Is
we
it
have to still
T-cell
think about the
memory?
logic of what is happening.
I
what-
was going to
do
say
you
the
have an
same thing.
answer?
So TNBC, I'll just quickly take 1 minute. The TNBC is not one disease. There are actually now molecular 5 subtypes. And if you look at the subtypes, each has a unique signature. So some of them are resistant to all immunotherapies.
Right.
So that statement is made. So I think in future the actual thing would be to select a group of TNBCs that probably acts best with immune checkpoint inhibitors, because there's a clear message that there's almost 1/3 TNBCs only have the immune checkpoint activated pathway.
So, yeah.
Regarding the two trials, because they continue to survive more in spite of
So maybe because immune system was modulated before, and later on this modulation, the host immune system takes over. So because the two arms are having comparator chemotherapy given, so that's why immunotherapy using in prior setting has shown a 25 months survival vis-a-vis. That is a 10 months difference. In other trials also, especially like melanoma and other where the immunotherapy is stopped much prior, even in some cases only after one dose, the immune therapy, the host immune system take over. So I think, with
So are
this
we
kind of
seeing that
data-
in other solid tumors too?
in lung also we are seeing that if we are stopping the immunotherapy much prior,
Right.
then also patient continued to respond. And now there's a 10 years data available in melanoma especially.
Yes, Supriya, go ahead.
Actually, it's not a direct parallel, what sir is saying, but there's a very well phenomenon known for radiation, which is called as radiation recall. So chemotherapy, I've never actually heard medical oncologists talking about chemo recall. But it actually
So,
does
the
happen.
pharmaceutical companies will be completely delighted. And, as an insurance, everybody should receive 2 doses of immune checkmate inhibitor in the hope that if and when they require any treatment, it will work better years or decades later. I mean, that's
Maybe
what
worth looking
that's the
into.
logic of, how this goes.
I think in the interest of time, we should conclude this session here. I thank Dr. Shona Nag for a wonderful moderation, our chairpersons and panelists.